It's 7:50 on a wet May Monday morning. I'm standing outside on Spratt Road waiting for my bus to get me to my job downtown. The schedule and app say it should be here, but it's not. I'm just left here, waiting impatiently, and asking, "Dude, where's my bus?"
Herdman Station, O train, line 1. Avoid causing delays. When riding the train, do not hold the doors open. Another train will arrive soon. Station Herdman, O train, ligne 1. Évitez de causer des retards. À bord du train, n'empêchez pas les portes de se fermer. Un autre train sera bientôt là. Last stop, dernier arrêt.
So let's start at the beginning. I'm Gio. I live in the south end suburbs of Ottawa, Riverside South. Every day I commute 19 kilometers from Riverside South to downtown Ottawa for work. What's typically a 30-minute drive by car can at times be a 1 hour and 10-minute transit commute. OC Transpo, the City of Ottawa's transit agency, serves Riverside South with one main bus line, the 99, which heads in two directions, one north and one south. Because of this, the 99 is a really important bus line to get people around. But it has a problem. It's incredibly unreliable. Not only are the 99 buses often late, they sometimes don't even show up. One morning I reached my breaking point. It was the third time that week I showed up to the stop early to wait for a bus I assumed would be on time. I ended up waiting, and nothing came. I was alone at first, but now a group formed along with me waiting also. Students, business people, the elderly, all waiting for the same thing. I just thought to myself, how is this acceptable? Why are these buses so unreliable? In frustration, I ended up sending multiple emails to OC Transpo about these issues, only to be met with automated replies telling me that the feedback has been successfully received and OC Transpo is committed to providing reliable services, but never actually getting a direct response in regards to my concerns. Currently, I don't drive, and even if I wanted to, the high cost of parking in clustered downtown streets are a significant deterrent for me. Most of my friends in the area who previously didn't drive ended up going out of their way to get their licenses due to the fact that the unreliable transit couldn't fit their needs. Lots of these happen to be students of Carleton University. Usually a drive between Riverside South to Carleton would be around 15 to 20 minutes. As of June 2024, the trip by bus is pushing almost an hour. This was something a friend of mine, Ben, knew all too well.
To live in Riverside South is to live very far away from things. And so if you don't have a car and you rely on the public transit, which I did, in fact, I got so frustrated that during the warmer months, I would actually bike the 15 kilometers from Riverside South to Carleton University, where I went to school, because my bike was more reliable and was actually faster than the bus times on Google Maps. To live in Riverside South and rely on public transportation is to be consistently frustrated.
The lack of service and poor reliability didn't go unnoticed and became a key point of Riverside South's 2022 local municipal election.
We also have a situation where there's a lot of bus cancellations and people don't feel the buses are servicing their neighborhoods.
It's unfortunate that we still have to complain about transit at this point. I have a 16-year-old. I'm unable to rely on the bus services to take my son to school or work.
Where I think a lot of residents have obviously lost confidence in OC Transpo, so that needs to be fixed.
I think we should understand, why are the buses not being there? Why are you missing your connections? The problem is the culture of the OC Transpo. They're never held accountable. You can miss your bus or a connection. It's not a big deal to them. I want a reliable, accountable bus.
M. McClellan, ran for office because the unreliable transit was such an issue for her.
Well, the running joke with me was I used to call it the magical mystery bus, the 99 magical mystery bus. And the reason I called it that is because you would look on your app and say, oh, in 3 minutes the bus 99 was going to arrive. And the magic was, is it going to come? And the mystery was, where is it? Because it was never there. You were in the same reality and there was no bus.
So we know how the residents feel about transit, but what does the data say? To truly get a grip on the issue, I tracked the service back in March. While I found most buses in the direction of Barrhaven were reliable, mostly being late by 3 to 7 minutes, they always came, which yes isn't perfect, but is still acceptable. However, buses in the direction of Herdman were a completely different story. They were typically 4 to 8 minutes late, but some as much as 17. The gaps in time were so large that I didn't know if a bus was early or was an incredibly late trip. Did I mention it was -3 that day? Imagine waiting 17 minutes for a bus in that temperature. Well, I did, and I can attest it was not fun. This led me to Riley Brockington, Transit Chair Board member as well as City Councillor of Ward 16.
It's not our job to get in there with wrenches and fix buses or immerse ourselves in operations, but some of the high-level issues that impact our residents on a daily basis with the system, we need to identify and address.
Riley is a huge advocate for public transit and was able to speak to me about a lot of the issues I encountered, and specifically illuminating what was contributing to late buses, performance versus reliability.
So there's a difference between performance statistics and reliability statistics. Performance means the route actually went out, the run which actually went out. Reliability statistics means within certain acceptable time range. So you could have a bus that's an hour late but still goes out, that meets the performance stat, but if it's an hour late, it doesn't meet the reliability stat. So performance stats are actually high in the city of Ottawa. It's the reliability data that is not acceptable. It's too low.
As I explored further, it seemed a lot of people all over Ottawa were facing the same issue.
I'd be standing at bus stops with a crowd of 30 or 40 people, and people would be saying, I've been here for 40 minutes. The bus is supposed to come every 10 minutes. What has happened? I mean, people were talking about it taking an hour to get locations that used to take 20 minutes and things like that.
That's Carrie Glynns-Elliott, one of the founding members of Ottawa Transit Riders, an organization dedicated to the improvement of transit services in Ottawa.
So we decided that we needed a group that would speak for transit riders. We say that we try to be the voice of transit riders. We're a member-driven organization. We do surveys and we have forums in different places. And we say, well, what are the issues that you have? And what would you like to see us challenge and prioritize? When I go out to the bus stop, I don't know if my bus is going to come. And you can't run a transit system with that kind of unreliability. It creates a huge amount of anxiety. If you have somewhere to be, if you're supposed to be at a job interview, a medical appointment, if you have to pick your kid up from daycare, the fact that you go out to the bus and you don't know if it's going to show up is just unbelievable to me. You have to have a reliable bus system.
When I was a teenager, I took the bus in Ottawa. And that was the chronic complaint I've been hearing all my life. I said it, I hear my students saying it. You stand out there, and of course the problem's most acute in the winter. Because of the delays, snow on the road, car accidents, blah, 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 blah. The bus doesn't show up on time. And so you're sitting out there freezing at 10 below zero.
Late buses or buses not coming at all seem to be a staple of OC Transpo's current reputation.
Man, you are one pathetic loser.
Just taking a waltz online will lead you to hundreds of posts from angry and frustrated riders. But that wasn't always the case. In fact, Ottawa used to be considered a model for how medium-sized cities could build transit. Back in the 1980s, the city had invested in building a bus rapid transit network called the Transitway, with the purpose of getting workers downtown faster. And in 2006, it had the highest transit rides per capita. But how does a successful and applauded system fail to meet the most basic of expectation just a few years later? It turns out it's not really a single issue, but rather multiple different mistakes, controversies, and missteps combining to cripple Ottawa's transit network. One or two would probably be survivable on their own, but when combined, they create an insuppressible amount of damage. One example of this would just be serving Ottawa, which is already an issue due to its spread out population and a primarily suburban land use pattern.
The Greenbelt, one day people will recognize, as much as it makes people feel warm and cuddly, one people realize it really did extend and expand what people call urban sprawl. And it really extended out the cities and the housing far outside of the city boundaries of the city of Ottawa.
Some of the worst served areas are suburbs just beyond the Greenbelt, places like Canada, Stittsville, Orleans, and of course, Riverside South.
It's planned in this deeply frustrating way where they have the city, the original kind of city of Ottawa, Nepean, kind of some of the other municipalities, and then they have a green belt that goes all the way around the original city of Ottawa. And then behind the green belt, they built suburbs. So the suburb that I lived in was Riverside South, which was behind the Greenbelt. So whenever I wanted to go anywhere, if I wanted to go downtown for work or something, first I have to spend, 10 kilometers getting out of the suburb and getting out of the kilometers of Greenbelt that surround the city, and then I'm in the city, and then I can sort of go downtown and get places.
We have a serious challenge with making sure that our transit map covers every part of the city, and it needs to cover every part of the city. I grew up in a fairly distant suburb of Quebec City, where there used to be peak time was one bus per hour. Where was I getting with this as a teenager who couldn't drive? So of course my incentive as soon as I could was to get a driver's license and start driving. Is this really what we want to do with today's teenagers?
But the transit that these areas do have is primarily rooted on getting commuters downtown, with limited service connecting different suburbs and communities to each other.
It's one thing if you're in the downtown core and there's an east-west route that kind of connect neighborhoods that are abutting one another, but in the suburbs, without having to, if you live in Canada, maybe you connect at Bayshore to go to Barhaven, that doesn't make sense for a lot of people. We don't do a good job connecting neighborhoods, communities.
On the flip side of this, some would say that that's your fault for choosing to live in the suburbs and expecting good transit.
A lot of people live in suburbs because they can't afford to live downtown. So saying that it's your choice is a bit cruel, right? I have a friend who's a refugee from Syria, and she lives actually fairly close to where you're talking about in South Ottawa, just South Gloucester. She doesn't have a car. She can't possibly afford it. But transit's terrible out there. She really has a tough time getting around. And the city can really step back and think, okay, with the current resources we have, can we provide better service to neighborhoods, to suburbs, rather than just focusing on the suburbs to downtown commuters, which for absolutely decades have been the main focus. OC Transpo has a bit of a hierarchy where certain transit riders are more valuable than other transit riders, and I would argue they need to flip that upside down, and they need to be really listening to transit-dependent people who may live in suburbs.
To add to that, similar-sized cities around the world have found ways to serve their suburbs with reliable transit. So the problem is bigger than just individuals choosing to live there. One issue worth noting is Ottawa's chaotic political decision-making process that it uses for transit projects. Riverside South's current city councillor, Steve DeRoche, knew this all too well.
Well, transit's been had a bit of a twisted history, right? In that in 2006, City Council made, I think, a very poor decision to cancel the original North-South LRT. I never supported that cancellation. It would have been critical for this community.
The 2006 line Steve was referring to was a proposed LRT that would run above ground from Barhaven Centre to the downtown core. The project was reported to cost $778 million to build, with the city using a public-private partnership model. But after a change in leadership following the tabling of the project, new Mayor of Ottawa Larry O'Brien took it to a vote in City Council and the project was dead.
Well, it was a highly politicized environment in terms of the debate at the City Council table, and unfortunately we were on the losing side of it by one vote.
In one afternoon, Council ended a project the city's been planning for half a decade. Councillors voted 13-11 to kill the deal.
And it was really
By one
vote, canceled that deal and really set this community back decades in terms of serving it with transit.
I hope you're all really proud. I know I'm certainly not proud.
It got caught up in politics and the financing. So it wasn't so much the idea of being opposed to LRT, because he did support LRT too, but the issue got caught up in the weeds and a lot of weedy technocratic issues. And so it's been a real schmozzle, as you know, since then.
The project was organized under a public-private partnership model, or P3 for short, which is where 1, the city comes up with project specifications, 2, the private sector develops proposal and bids to construct it, and 3, whoever gets the project assumes responsibility for bringing it to reality and accepting financial liability for delays or problems. This model is great if it works properly, because it allows the city to avoid cost overruns, as the private contractor will assume liability if it happens. But this can also create an incentive to blame others. For example, if the consortium building a project can blame a supplier for a delay, then they can just sue them for penalties caused by it. These contracts also ensure that if politicians change the plans in the middle of construction, the consortium will then need to be compensated for the additional costs or lost revenue from those channels. The P3 model essentially creates a heavily financial incentive to blame actors such as other contractors or politicians for any delays that occur. For this reason, P3 projects that encounter problems often get bogged in lawsuits where the parties end up trying to shift blame and thus financial responsibility onto each other. This is exactly what happened with the 2006 cancellation of the North-South LRT. Due to provisions in the public-private partnership, a lawsuit was brought up against the city.
The city's previous transit plan for $1 billion was cancelled after the engineering firm Siemens had signed on to build it.
In September of 2009, City Council eventually settled and agreed to pay $36.7 million to end the legal troubles.
Zero means zero. We're getting zero for $37 million for a bad decision of this council, and I can't vote for it. I reject it. I think the taxpayers of this city reject it. I think they should be outraged. This is the worst decision that this council has ever made, and now we're paying the price.
Ottawa went on to repeat the overly political decision-making process and public-private partnership with its next mayor and transit project.
To start digging 10 stories down or 100 feet in the ground, you don't know what the real cost is going to be.
With the cancellation of the 2006 North-South LRT, City Council planned an alternative East-West LRT to replace it. Named the Confederation line, it was planned to run from Blair to Tunney's Pasture.
Many expected the centerpiece would be a light rail transit system connecting the city's north down to the south. Instead, the Transit Committee recommended this, a light rail system spanning east to west between Blair Station and Tunney's Pasture.
The project was officially launched in 2012 following the election of Jim Watson in 2010, and construction began in 2013. Despite the previous issues, the city chose a P3 partnership model for the Confederation line with a construction consortium named Rideau Transit Group, who accepted responsibility for designing, building, financing, and maintaining the LRT for 30 years in exchange for a fixed price of $2.1 billion.
It's my pleasure to welcome you to City Hall as we formally mark our partnership with the Rideau Transit Group. Today is a day for celebration as we mark the fixed-price contract that guarantees on-time and on-budget delivery of a truly exceptional light rail system.
The name of Confederation fits because considering how long it took, it might as well started during Confederation back in 1867. The project was significantly delayed and riddled with construction issues and lawsuits.
Tunneling at the eastern portal of the LRT has been put on hold after a sudden road collapse early this morning. City officials admit the huge hole is most likely caused by their tunneling work.
But just try to imagine what would have happened if that hole had opened up just a few meters farther out here on Laurier Avenue at this time of the day.
Rats have plagued Ottawa before, but now they're being seen in different parts of the city. The growing problem is being attributed to the increased construction around the city.
The LRT digging around downtown area and whatnot will be making those rats move around and want to find new homes.
Standing by live at the corner of Waller and Laurier, where a construction crane this morning toppled over as it was lowering a concrete mixer into the LRT's eastern portal near the University of Ottawa campus. No one was injured.
I'm standing right at the corner of Rideau and Sussex here, and you can see the guy with the yellow jacket. That's where the sinkhole is. It's about 5 meters across. It happened when they were working on the light rail system underneath.
Suddenly this air raid siren starts coming on, and it comes on, it's very calm at first, you just hear this big, weird, loud noise, and the intercom says, excuse me, shoppers, there's been a gas leak. We're going to need you all to evacuate. They didn't say a giant hole opened up in Rideau Street. Everybody please get out of here right now.
The car got gobbled up by the sinkhole. Not only a car, but a street light.
I have no concern sharing that throughout 5 years of a $2.1 billion rail system, there have been a lot of concerns expressed both from our side, RTG side, independent assessors, rail experts, and so forth. And the information that's out there floating, the unfortunate part about that is if you look at it in isolation, you start to make judgments, and that's a very risky game, because I think it's invoking fears and concerns that in some cases may not be founded.
As public frustration grew over the project's many delays and disruptions, municipal politicians felt pressure to push the LRT into service.
This city paid for and will get a world-class system, and that's what our position has been over and over again.
Are you confident that you will be able to hand over this system to the city by Q2 2019?
Yes, I am confident.
And despite the attempts by some to delay the process, it's full steam ahead.
But Council's getting very little information at this point. We've turned this process over to private sector bodies that are managing the process. You saw that at the March 6th meeting. We weren't getting answers from our public officials. We were getting answers from folks that traditionally deal with these P3 models, which we hired instead of Infrastructure Ontario. So
I cannot see any reason why the city staff could not explain in full to council, and by the way, the taxpayers, the people that are footing the bill for this, what went on here.
And I'm still very confident that we're going to have train service for passengers in the month of September of this year.
But that doesn't sound like the August 16th date is going to be met.
But finally, in September of 2019, the LRT finally opened to the public.
On behalf of the City of Ottawa, I would like to welcome you to Tunney's Pastor Transit Station for the official opening and ceremonial ride of the O Train Confederation line.
This is an exciting and historic day for all of us in the City of Ottawa. Ladies and gentlemen, the day is finally here. The future of transit in Ottawa starts now, as residents and visitors alike will be riding the O Train Confederation line and discovering the benefits of this transformative, important project.
It ran well for the first few weeks of operation, but once it switched to full service in October following the retirement of all downtown bus routes, a flood of problems became evident. For example, the entire system was shut down for an hour after an impatient rider forced a door open at U-Ottawa Station.
Ladies and gentlemen, this train is not going anywhere. You'll have to exit the train and go to the platform on the other side.
Passengers were exiting the train, and they continued to exit the train even when the door closing system notified them that the doors were closing. A customer pushed open one of the doors while exiting, causing the doors to jam.
A few months later, an overhead catenary line broke during the train's first winter and triggered a system shutdown for 18 hours.
After just 4 months, though, we're seeing repairs as big as this. Is it normal?
I can't say if it's normal. It's happened in other places.
Brand new systems that the wires have come down?
I don't know if it's brand new systems, but as I said, it's not something it's not an unusual occurrence, and it's not something that we planned for, but we mitigated the issue.
When an incident of this magnitude, which is the first time we've had to institute the full R1 service, it tested our patience, it tested our passengers' patience, and we must do better.
And shortly after that, heavy snowfall causes a switch to freeze and service is pulled.
I once wrote a column about the Line 1 of the LRT asking, did we accidentally buy an indoor train? Because, it doesn't work if it's too sunny. If it rains too much, it stops. It's too cold, it stops. Too hot, it melts. The wheels aren't round. There's so many problems. It's almost funny.
The train then suffered a unique amount of incidents involving its bogies. Originally, it was thought that the train's wheels were not perfectly round, but after significant investigation, it was discovered that the train's European-manufactured wheel-bearing assembly was not equipped to deal with the tight curves of the North American rails.
The shape of the rail versus the shape of the European wheel, so American rail versus European wheel, that in itself sounds like a pretty simple fix. Replace the tracks, replace the wheels, pick one or the other. It may be that the vehicle size is precluding a permanent solution. And now they're into how do we re-engineer one or the other of the systems to make it work for this size of vehicle. I don't know that.
This placed significant pressure on the wheel assembly and caused it to fail over time, specifically leading to 2 derailments in 2021. The first derailment, the train happened to be empty and was en route to a maintenance shed. The second time, the train traveled over 300 meters and was full of passengers. That derailment caused major issues, as the train was shut down after the incident and replacement buses were rolled out. But OC Transpo lacked a proper amount of buses to run both regular routes and replacement services, causing an incredible amount of delays for passengers. The delay lasted 54 days, roughly 7.5 weeks. Given the P3 model of the project, the different contractors began to shift blame to avoid liability. The train manufacturers Alstom blamed the track, and the construction consortium, Rideau Transit Group, blamed the wheel assembly, both spending years pointing fingers at each other instead of fixing the issue. The mass amount of issues sparked discussions for a judicial inquiry. City Council initially voted down motions for one, citing that such an investigation was not necessary and would just cost too much.
There's one single guaranteed outcome of a judicial inquiry: a lot of lawyers will get really, really rich. And such, an inquiry will do absolutely nothing to push RTG and Alstom to improve their performance.
They would only commit to a more limited Auditor General report. The debate over this motion was acrimonious and featured microphones being cut off.
Reasonable substitution or...
All right, so we're going to the vote now. If you support
and city councilors walking off in anger.
Did you cut Diane Dean off? Yeah, really, cutting women off. I love it. That's nice.
Would you agree, though, that the mayor was really trying to subvert the democratic process yesterday by cutting off Councillor Deans?
I'm not sure, Adrian. I think he said after the meeting that there were a lot of people speaking at once and he was trying to maintain decorum as the chair of the meeting.
Why didn't you object to how he behaved yesterday?
You know what? In the middle of that meeting, middle of that conversation, we had all sorts of people who were interrupting each other, yelling at each other. It wasn't a very productive meeting for anyone. And the mayor stated he needed to maintain decorum. It's not appropriate when we have people debating and discussing when everyone's talking at once. It's very hard to do a Zoom council meeting with everyone speaking at the same time.
But the mayor's action was more than disrespectful and possibly even sexist. Objectively, it affected the course of the debate, did it not?
It may have. He made a ruling, and that's the way that council proceeded on it.
The provincial government then stepped in and forced their own public inquiry.
From transit riders in the city of Ottawa, from their perspective, this is something that's needed. They want answers. They deserve a system that works. And as a funding partner, it's incumbent upon us to make sure we understand how the money is being spent and what's gone wrong.
With even Premier Doug Ford acknowledging the messy state of the nation's capital.
It was just absolute in shambles and stunk to high heaven, and we wanted to dig deeper.
Mayor Jim Watson was noticeably upset by this.
And my only request to the province is please stop surprising us. Let us know in advance when you're going to make a decision that affects our taxpayers.
The inquiry finally began in June of 2022. From the plethora of new information, it was revealed that most issues stemmed from the fact that the train, which was a completely new design, was unproven. Another bombshell was that city manager at the time, Steve Kanalokis, specifically ordered for testing criteria for the LRT to be lowered. In addition, Jim Watson suggested that metrics of the train be swapped to make performance look better in reports. The final result of the hearings was described by many as scathing and rocked City Council.
Unconscionable, egregious violations of the public trust, the LRT inquiry final report slamming senior city staff and RTG.
It was unconscionable that RTG and its main subcontractor knowingly gave the city inaccurate information about when they would finish building the LRT.
A key theme that you will see running through the report is the failure of the city and RTG to work together collaboratively to further the interests of the people of Ottawa in a safe and reliable LRT system. People and entities engaged in public infrastructure projects like this must always, always, always keep that public interest at the forefront of everything that they do. And that, as a guiding principle, was lacking at times, very key times in this project.
He goes on to say, quote, most troubling was the deliberate effort by Steve Kanalakis, the city manager, to mislead council on the decision to lower the testing criteria and on the testing results.
He finds that Manconi and the mayor withheld information from council.
I think the final outcomes are not surprising to those of us who were there. We knew that we were not being given information. We knew others had information that we were never given. It's the reason we needed this inquiry. It was absolutely necessary so that the public now knows, the culture at City Hall of secrecy, of political puffery, if you will.
If the climate that was apparent in this project were to continue, that will compromise the public's trust in the city's ability to carry out this kind of project. The recommendations, the major themes running through the recommendations are transparency and cooperation. Those are the recommendations that will restore the public's trust in the city's ability to undertake this kind of project.
While the issues of the Confederation line only affected a 12.5 kilometer stretch around the downtown, OC Transpo's decisions surrounding the LRT rollout caused problems that rippled across the system. OC Transpo essentially did not plan any contingencies if the LRT failed. In preparation of the line opening, they ended up laying off hundreds of bus drivers and sold off major parts of the city's bus fleet. As a result, whenever the LRT broke down or had to be taken out of service, there was no backup bus capacity to fill in the gaps. As a result, bus service became increasingly unreliable, as the limited bus capacity was spread out over all routes. This ended up happening a lot, especially recently with the planned and unplanned service outages lasting up to 2 weeks. These delays have a very real impact on the public and damage the reputation of OC Transpo greatly.
I was 25 minutes late because 3 buses didn't show up. Now I've lost 2 jobs because I would show up late for a shift due to reasons out of my control.
OC Transpo is warning there may continue to be a higher than normal number of bus cancellations heading into next week. Hundreds of trips have been canceled in the last few days as OC Transpo deals with staffing shortages.
Disabled riders, though, are disproportionately impacted. Paratranspo, OC Transpo's share ride service for people with disabilities, has struggled in recent years to meet the needs of the disabled community.
Say, for example, you want to get a loaf of bread or a pound of butter at the store, and you don't have access to transit, you have to book the next day. My wife had a medical emergency, and she uses para. And there are some times when you call, they can't even get you to the hospital on the same day. So you have to book it today to get there in the first thing in the morning, sort of thing.
In this city, there's been this sort of spiral so that people who need accessible transit are not able to get around. Para-transpo has shrunk, and it's really hard to get people who don't use accessible transit to care about accessible transit. And I think we need to flip our priorities, and we need to say the people who are most transit dependent need the most of our resources.
I don't know if they're hearing us and pushing for us. Yeah, so you're just going around in circles.
Due to the poor reliability of what seems to be all the service offered by them, and decline in ridership after the pandemic, OC Transpo has had to face significant financial headwinds. Projections from August 2023 predicted an almost $40 million deficit, which, if you've been watching things, you'll know is now our reality.
I'm speaking publicly because there is a sense of urgency about this now. We're heading into our 2025 budget process. We need to make some decisions, and we need help from other levels of government, or we will face rising property tax increases. We're going to face having to hike transit fares, or we're going to have to cut services like public transit to cover this shortfall.
In an attempt to resolve its financial issues, OC Transpo at first raised its fares. As well as raising the cost to use the service itself was cut under the guise of the New Ways to Bus program. Of course, these cuts didn't end up doing much.
Under the new draft budget, virtually all transit riders will be forced to pay more.
The single ride fare would jump to $4, making public transit in Ottawa costlier than most other cities in the country. If the 2025 draft budget laid out on Wednesday is approved, those transit passes for seniors will increase by more than 120%.
Why? But what am I trying to say with all this? Trust me, this isn't just a whole song and a dance to justify how much I hate the city and OC Transpo. And let me also make it clear, I'm not saying I could do any better. The best transit system I can design is with wooden trains. As I've said before, Ottawa was previously a model city for transit, the key word being previously. But I think Ottawa deserves and can do better. While the buses I talked about in the beginning may be frequently late, in Riverside South, they'll soon have a train in its place. The city has been extending the Trillium line of the original O train to Riverside South, which is slated to end here at Limebank Station. The extension is on track to open within months from now and will provide me and other residents in the area with better access to Line 1, the airport, and Carleton University. It's been a bumpy ride waiting, I'll admit. This was supposed to be open in April of 2023, and now it's looking like mid-November. But I have hope, especially as the train has just passed its testing, with no criteria being lowered. And additionally, construction is continuing on an additional east-west extension of the Confederation line to provide greater access to the suburbs of Canada and Orleans. Residents of Ottawa love to criticize the LRT and its many problems. And trust me, I've been no stranger to it. But with big changes comes big hurdles, and the city has been learning from its mistakes. Sure, it took an inquiry in various firings, retirements, and elections, but the city is beginning to improve. Ottawa is accused of being boring. It's often seemed to avoid trying new things and essentially stuck to what it knew worked in the past. But with the LRT, the city decided to have a bold vision and try something new and ambitious. Yes, it's had a lot of problems, but once the whole system is fully built and the issues are resolved, I think we'll be grateful that we took these risks and invested in our city's future. Again, it's all just optimistic hoping, but maybe with a little of it, we'll finally make it out of this.
So I want to see that. I want to see not just office commuters, but people who are out socially, tourists. People take transit, and transit would be a first choice because it's rapid, because it's transit, because it's clean.
It's a good social good for the city of Ottawa. I think over the next 10 years it will get better instead of worse. So I'm optimistic about the future of transit in Ottawa, even though I moved to Toronto.
Public transit is a really good use. So I'm hopeful long-term that with the expansion and with more focus on transit-dependent people and a more awareness of transit being a good use of funds, that we will turn this ship around. It's probably worth it.
We need to look forward. We need to say, we're in this situation. Now let's take all the lessons we can learn from it so that, number one, we don't repeat the same mistake, but also we improve system efficiency and reduce costs, and at the ultimate, right, customer service, level of service going forward from this point forward.
So I think the LRT will work. I think it's going to be successful in Ottawa one day. Once we iron out all of these horrible problems that we've had, one day we will look back at maybe 5 or 10 or 15 years from now and say, oh, it was a brilliant decision. Yes, there were a lot of problems with implementation, but it was the right way to go.
So yes, you have to make it more efficient and a better option to ride transit than to have to drive your own personal vehicle. And people, not being stupid, will choose the better option. You know, it's like planting a tree. The best time to do it was 20 years ago. The second best time to do it is right now.
But what the future will actually bring for Ottawa and OC Transpo, though, is uncertain. We're just left waiting for a bus or a train that will probably be late.
There ain't no bus a-comin' up the transit way. I ain't seen the 95 in 51 days. I'm stuck at Baseline Station and time keeps dragging on. By the time I get there, my Christmas party will be done. When I was a young boy, I used to ride my bike. When I was in college, I used to hitchhike. But now I'm an adult, I guess I'll start to walk. 'Cause when you stop to think about it, it's only 1,300 blocks. They said this would be over, they said it wouldn't last. At least that's what they told me when I bought my January pass. But now look at me, I'm trudging through the snow. This is the first time in my life that I've envy got to know. They say it's the mayor to blame for this mess. When he said zero means zero, he meant bus service. So the mayor and the union, well, they just can't agree. But they can all kiss my ass in order of seniority.
Yeah! Rick Curry and the transit song, and you can